Fox News alert, 2 weeks to go. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump stumping in the battleground state of Florida today as part of their final push to Election Day. All this as a new national poll showing a dead heat. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, Harris Faulkner, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy, also from FBN, co-host of After the Bell, Melissa Francis, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy. We have a Fox Business trifecta today. The host of Lou Dobbs tonight. Lou Dobbs himself is here, and he is outnumbered.
Actually, you're
Harris
not.
is outnumbered.
I'm outnumbered. You guys are off of Fox Business. But you know
You
what?
just took the pressure off.
I'm
Thanks
giving
so
it
much.
right back to you, my friend.
No.
That outnumberedness.
I love it.
Welcome. I
Good
haven't
to
seen you
have
in a
you.
while.
Good to see
How
you.
you feeling
In
this final stretch?
I love it. You know, you're talking about 2 weeks to go in this thing. It seems like we've been sort of dreading the pace of this thing for so long.
Yeah.
And now suddenly I'm dreading the prospect that it might be over.
You are?
Somewhat. But I'm ready.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're ready for you. Let's get started. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton looking to build support in Florida again today, a day after early in-person voting began in the Sunshine State. This is an independent daily tracking survey billed as the nation's most accurate, shows the candidates locked in a virtual tie, even as other polls show Hillary leading the presidential race. The Investor's Business Daily poll shows Trump and Clinton neck and neck, with Hillary leading 42 to 41% in a four-way race. But a new CNN poll finds the Democratic nominee leading by 5 points nationally, 49 to 44%. All this as Donald Trump continues to denounce most of the polls as phony, while declaring that he's actually winning.
The system is corrupt, folks, and I've been saying it, it's rigged. I've been saying it for a long time. The system is rigged. WikiLeaks also shows how John Podesta rigged the polls by oversampling Democrats, a voter suppression technique, and that's happening to me all the time. It's called voter suppression. Because people will say, oh, gee, Trump's out. Folks, we're winning. We're winning. We're winning.
He really keeps hammering on this point, Lou, that the polls are wrong and that he's actually winning.
And it's not an accident, as you know, that he is doing that, because this resonates with his base. It resonates with independents, because everyone knows these polls aren't making a lot of sense. You've got some outliers at 12-point differentials and others with him in the lead. National tracking polls, specifically IBD and the LA Times USC polls.
But his critics are quick to point out that when this race started, and especially in the primary season, he was quick to point out those polls when they showed that he was winning.
You know, quick is an interesting word to use, because remember, it took a long time for him to plow through the national liberal media attacking him as not being serious, not being able to get even to the primaries. And the next thing you know, it was February 1st, and he had a little setback in Iowa. And the next thing you know, he starts, the Trump train, as they call it, starts rolling. So there's been, I know what you mean by quick, but this thing was a process that he had to overcome national media bias every step of the way, and has done so.
It is tough to determine. And for the average voter to look at these polls and determine, well, which ones do you pay attention to and which ones are telling us what's going on?
So I'm wondering if they're paying that much attention anymore. I mean, remember when we were on the ground at the conventions and you would talk with people, particularly obviously the RNC in Cleveland about this, people were really resisting the notion of taking them. Like, they didn't really want to take part. They're going to keep it close to the vest. So I've often wondered all along how accurate they've been, knowing that people either are not going to be forthright because they don't want to start that conversation with anybody, or they're just going to avoid the process altogether.
What's interesting here with the IBD poll specifically is, you know, we talk a lot about whether these polls are skewed based on how many landlines are used, what is the methodology, and with IBD they actually use more cell phones than landlines, 65 to 35%. And you also have to remember, in all of these polls, Trump is still up with independents. And you also have to note that independents make up more of the electorate than Democrats or Republicans. 34% independents, 33% Democrats, 29% Republicans.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. So you look at all the polls all together, and he's lagging, obviously. But at the same time, he comes out and he says these are rigged. Everybody sort of laughs at him. But you go back to when he said, and we're going to get to the story later in the show, so I don't want to undercut it, but this idea that when he said the violence was being incited at his rallies by Hillary Clinton's team, and people lashed out at him and said, you know, what a thing to say, you know, to point the finger like that. You have no evidence. Lo and behold, here we come down the line, and we're seeing evidence. So he says these things that people mark as crazy, and then later the evidence trickles out. I don't know.
Can I say, people aren't doing that. The national liberal media is doing that. And it's a really important distinction because they're not speaking for the people. Donald Trump and presumably Hillary Clinton are speaking for the people, but not the national liberal media.
Lou, because you're the king of business and you're on the couch with us today, is the comparison to Brexit and that surprise turnout of that vote, is that a fair comparison to what Donald Trump is pretty much setting up that we may see?
I think it's a fair comparison if you're pulling for Donald Trump and you want that last minute flip in the numbers. Beyond that, you're talking about a nation, you know, a much smaller nation with a very different issue. This is the most hotly contested presidential campaign, and I know some people say, well, 2000 was a pretty contested in 1980, but this is the most vicious, dirty. I mean, this is a brawl. And
well, what it is right now is tight in a lot of those polls. I'm curious to know the difference in strategy for Kellyanne Conway and the campaign manager who says, yes, we are behind in the polls, and for Donald Trump, who for a second in a tweet said yes and then went back on the stump and said, no, we're winning, winning, winning.
Well, I think Kellyanne and Donald Trump both understand very clearly. You have to emulate the Democrats in two respects. One is you can't have any more of this internecine warfare that's been going on. And secondly, you don't give up an inch. You don't concede a damn thing, because the Democrats never do, and that's why they often prevail, and most recently in these last two cycles prevailed, because they never allow for a fracture in the party.
Interesting. Well, talk to Bernie Sanders about that. We'll move on. As Donald Trump stumps hard ahead of Election Day, he insists there is a path to the 270 electoral votes needed to win the White House, despite what some critics and analysts are saying. Here he is a short time ago talking about the states he needs to lock down.
I think I'm winning in Florida, which I have to win. I think I'm winning in North Carolina from what I hear. I'm polling very well in Ohio. In fact, I'm going to win Ohio. We're doing phenomenally well in Iowa. I think we're either winning or tied. It's going to be very, very close.
Meanwhile, Vice Presidential nominee Mike Pence has a message for wary Republicans.
It's time for Republicans to come home. We've got support from independents. We've got support from many Democrats. But as you've said many times, Sean, it's time for Republicans to come home and come together, elect Donald Trump.
So piggybacking off of what Lou just said is this idea that emulate, if you will, the Democrats. And that's what their message is right now. You got to come home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, the right to get out there and give that message, it's a little late. We wish they could stay on message throughout the whole campaign. Better late than never. But there's still 2 weeks left, and we know how things can move. I'm looking at the early returns in Florida. We don't know how people voted, but we know how many people voted by mail. Republicans have returned 31,000 more ballots so far than Democrats have. And it kind of speaks to that whole thing, like you said, about people not wanting to say who they're voting for.
And to intensity, perhaps. Maybe that gives us a little clue about intensity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Tim Kaine had 30 people show up at West Palm Beach for an event yesterday. 30 people.
Wow, the weather
that's
was
almost
fabulous,
3 dozen.
Yes.
But I heard the weather was good for surfing. I don't know.
It might have been that, but then you had 15,000 show up in Tampa, where the surfing apparently wasn't so good for Donald Trump.
There you go. I want to talk about a little place, Maine's 2nd Congressional District, just one electoral vote in that rural northern part of the state. And Trump and Clinton are going after it. And what that tells us, because it was leaning GOP, now it's a toss-up. How much does that matter?
Well, I don't know. Explain the strategy here, because, you know, the Democrats seem to be downplaying how well they're doing compared to the Trump campaign right now. Why are you seeing Donald Trump not saying, look, we do have a lot of ground to make up. We are not where we want to be. We heard that from Kellyanne Conway. I mean, wouldn't that help get voters out if they knew that, the race is tight, but we're not where we need to be?
I think that what you're saying is exactly correct. But There is so much anger. There is so much cold anger, as some wags have expressed it, within the Republican base. They don't have to say much. They're going to be out there. People were in a line, I mentioned in Tampa, for 12 hours.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this across the country. This isn't differentiated by anything other than the bluest of blue states. You're seeing it everywhere else.
I mean, but that's what's going to make election night so interesting, because so much conventional wisdom has been so wrong and so far off base in this election cycle, throughout the whole thing. And people who were prognosticating and predicting, they were dead wrong in the primary. And, you know, we're still seeing a very tight race. Now, granted, Donald Trump isn't up in any of these polls, but two, Rasmussen and LA Times.
The national polls.
Yeah.
So, Kennedy, let me ask you this, though. And we can put up the electoral scoreboard as we see it here at Fox. If, excuse me, this is the Trump campaign prediction map.
Yeah.
Forgive me there. All right, so we want to make that very clear. And you see that Texas is obviously not in play on their map. But what I was going to say, and it is when you look kind of a trajectory process, our map shows that Texas and other places are not in play. So what is he seeing that's different on the ground? Because he has been on the ground and he's getting, as Lou said, those huge rallies. So he's talking to people.
No, he is. But, you know, again, what makes it interesting is states that have been traditionally Democrat or Republican are now either pink or the lightest of blue. And that means election night, they really could fall either way, because Texas and Georgia now very much in play where they weren't before. And, you know, what does that mean exactly? We don't know. And frankly, if I were in a state that had early voting, I wouldn't be voting 2 weeks out, because I still want to see what's going to happen if the Clinton campaign really has more surprises and more brokelets. And Giuliani is promising from the Trump campaign that they've got more surprises. I want to see how everything coalesces and falls into place.
U.S. Supreme Court picks are what people tell me time and time again on both sides of the political aisle, which are irrespective of any sort of late October surprise or anything like that. And I'm fascinated by those low numbers of people who say that they haven't made up their mind yet, which is why they're willing to vote early.
The low numbers or the high numbers?
The lower numbers that we've been seeing recently.
Yeah, I'm surprised there's anyone out there, though, at this point who isn't undecided. As I've said, I'm going as the undecided voter on Halloween because I'm not sure they really exist except on that night. We've had so much out there. You got to know who you're voting for at this point, no?
All right. We're going to move on.
But
we'll come back to all of that. Don't look sad, Lou.
Disappointed is all.
Don't be. We're going to talk more. Years after President Obama promised Americans our health care costs would go down. Oh, you're going to chew on that for us, Lou. The White House is announcing Obamacare premiums will soon skyrocket by double digits. So what is the impact 2 weeks out from Election Day? A lot of people picking their enrollments right now, right? This is the time of year. And outrage building after thousands of our nation's heroes are ordered to repay their enlistment bonuses. Sandra, this is one of the most clicked on things yesterday that we talked about. A decade after going to war, the government wants that money back. And there's a problem, though. What is it? How on earth did all this happen in the first place? And after the TV version of us wraps up, you can chat with us online and watch our live show called Outnumbered Overtime. OT, baby. Or you can watch it on our page, foxnews.com/outnumbered. Click on the Overtime tab, or Facebook Live. Our handle is Outnumbered FNC, and we're on our Twitter machines right now. So tweet Birdie during the commercial. See ya.
Obamacare has to be repealed and replaced, and it has to be replaced with something much less expensive for the people, and otherwise this country is in even bigger trouble than anybody thought.
Donald Trump blasting Obamacare earlier today as many Americans are about to be hit with higher health care costs yet again. That's not what they promised, right? The White House now admitting that President Obama's signature health care law will see double-digit premium hikes next year again. And many Americans will only have one insurer to choose from, one choice. That's not a choice. After several national carriers scaled back their rolls. But administration says that the subsidies are rising as well and will insulate most customers from sticker shock. This news comes just 1 week before open enrollment and 2 weeks before Election Day. Lou Dobbs, this drives me nuts. Anyone who could do math knew this whole thing was a lie. I watched the video again this morning where the president said, your premiums, your family's premiums will drop by $2,500 a year, year after year. By that logic, they'd eventually be free. But setting that aside for a moment, they've done nothing but gone up. It's so frustrating.
It's frustrating, and it is a horrible fate for millions of Americans who were relying on this and who thought this was going to be the solution.
What a
because
lie.
their president promised them, made 5 promises in effect that he broke. He lied and continued to lie. And so did the insurance companies who were being subsidized. This turned out to be a $1 trillion giveaway to them.
Yep.
And now they don't want to play. I understand. It's a disaster economically, financially. But the Congress of the United States, led by the Democrats at that time, who put this into law, the president should be held accountable. Every one of them were lying SOBs, and they knew it at the time. And MIT's boy genius, John Gruber, was worse. He was the avatar for all of this.
Yep.
And a special place in hell is reserved for him.
Yeah, but I mean, thank goodness for his transparency, I guess is a nice way to
It was too
clean up
late.
A little late, though.
It
That's
was
the
too
problem.
late, but it gave us an idea of why certain things had happened. Maybe we never would have been told.
But then
Well,
we had to watch
we
the
knew
thing.
from the beginning.
We had to watch
We
the
didn't
thing
need John
implode
Gruber
and free
to tell us
fall
exactly how he
in
did it.
slow motion.
Not
And
as-
the president in 2013 said people's premiums have gone down because of competition. And he tried to say because of greater choice. Now the insurance market is better, and it's better for most Americans. But the interesting thing is, Democrats don't care if this fails, because what it does is pushes everyone toward a single payer system,
Right.
which is what they ultimately
Exactly
want.
right.
They say the fix now is more people on Medicaid and is some sort of a tax credit, but that doesn't fix
Good
Obamacare.
luck
That is
getting
an admission of
doctors
failure.
with Medicaid folding in Medicare for our aging population too, because many of them, no, they're not willing to take it. And so you've got a whole lot of people, as Lou just said, who are going to get stuck. And so what is President Obama saying? He's talking about that single payer now on the stump, which is an odd place to be talking about it since it's already in place as Obamacare. So is he also willing to repeal and replace it with something else?
No, I think they knew, Sandra, exactly where all this was going, right? I mean, we were heading in the direction where insurance companies were going to drop out. We're seeing that in so
we
many
saw
markets.
these problems
There's
from
only
the very
one.
beginning. There was a lot that pointed to this being as bad as it is today. And we all knew that. And we were
The
reporting on it.
mathematics was not complicated.
So I love Speaker Paul Ryan referencing the president, comparing this to the Samsung Galaxy Note 7. He actually
one that
compared
blows up?
Obamacare to the phone that's blowing up. He said, that's right. That's a good comparison. This disastrous law is blowing up, but at least you can return the phone.
Is this the same Paul Ryan
Ouch.
who is doing the president's bidding on federal spending and the omnibus bill? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
Oh,
mean
no,
to.
he's such a policy wonk. He's so good at winnowing down the budget.
Right, boy.
Well,
Right,
just
boy.
remember that single payer system that we're going towards, if you like the health coverage at the VA, that's where we're headed.
Can you
That's
keep
what all
your
this is
doctor?
about. Yeah, no. All right, no laughing matter. Hillary Clinton facing serious allegations over a duck. I wish I were kidding. Why an undercover video could land the Democratic nominee in real hot water with that duck. Plus, the growing universal outrage over veterans being told to pay back their enlistment bonuses a decade after going to war. The rare bipartisanship on Capitol Hill calling for a fix.
All right, new controversy for Hillary Clinton after another undercover video released from the conservative group Project Veritas. It allegedly shows key Democratic Party operative Robert Creamer talking about Hillary Clinton's personal involvement in sending Donald Duck mascots to Trump rallies to harass the billionaire businessman about not releasing his tax returns. Now, if this is true, it could be a violation of federal election laws, which forbid cooperation between candidates and outside groups. Lou, how deep is her yogurt on this?
I would say that not as deep as it's going to be when the Disney IP attorneys get
Right,
through with
that's
it.
what I was thinking.
I mean, I know they don't pay attention to laws of any kind over at the Clinton cartel, but at some point Disney does tend to lose its sense of humor. I mean, you could probably break into their studios and have less legal action than if you appropriated one of their IP images, and this is, certainly that in 70-year standing.
All right,
Well,
but
and especially if you pull in one of those images on a possible crime. I mean, if there was some sort of not just crossover but collusion between the candidate and outside groups, and now you've got the Donald Duck in the middle of it. I mean, that's legally messy.
Creamer says it was her idea. That she was the one who wanted ducks on the ground. He gave her ducks on the ground, but it doesn't stick. Nothing sticks to her, and I think this is the same thing.
People may go, we don't know if this
the duck muck won't get stuck to her is what we're. I mean, I cannot believe that we are having a conversation about a red-haired duck. I can't believe that they're saying. I mean, what would be the incentive of this guy on the tape to lie when he's like, Hillary thinks this is a great idea?
Well, don't tell anybody.
So
He says don't tell anybody.
that anyone would think this is a great idea. But again, I would say Donald Trump said before she's sending people to incite violence.
Why didn't anybody believe him?
People said because it sounds crazy. Who would do that? But it turns out she was.
I know, and then we're asking the question, did she break any laws here? But does that matter?
I don't think it matters. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it matters at all. Remember, you're talking about a bunch of lowlifes in those in that video who are going out disrupting Donald Trump rallies and leading to violence against police officers as well as rally supporters. So I mean, that seems a little, well, un-Donald Duckish.
Yeah, I don't think Donald would do that.
So if Disney, and I believe they're still the arm of like another network, an alphabet soup network, as I like to call them, what happens if they don't protest? Doth think you protest?
Well, Donna Brazile already intervened.
Is that?
They could
Donna Brazile put an end to it once they intervened. As if she didn't know about it beforehand that it was.
It's like, oh, you know
God
what? Disney actually doesn't like this. Isn't that weird?
Shock.
Yeah.
But it turns out I bet Hillary has enough supporters at ABC.
That's what I'm asking.
That was where she was going. I like that.
If they don't stand up, is this indicative again of maybe a lean in one portion of the media out there?
You know, we don't need leans. I mean, we got whole, you know, we've got half gainers and swan
not even the
dives
LIE
going into the tank.
They are so cozily in bed with her, they could open a mattress store.
Oh,
wow. I mean, that is a compliment.
All right.
On some level.
Well, speaking of outrage, it is growing now that we know thousands of California soldiers are being forced to repay enlistment bonuses. This was a huge topic yesterday, and there is more on it now. They were at war, went to war for our country a decade ago, given those bonuses to do so. And now the Pentagon is reportedly acknowledging the problem probably extends beyond California. Though they say there is a review process that could relieve those affected. Hope so, because some are saying they're going to go in debt to have to pay that money back. Meanwhile, lawmakers are calling on Congress to come up with a legislative fix and to halt the debt recovery. And both presidential candidates are reacting. Hillary Clinton says in a statement, quote, I'm appalled that National Guard officials are attempting to recoup money from soldiers who accepted bonuses a decade ago. It is unacceptable to now subject them and their families to undue financial burdens thanks to mismanagement from the California National Guard and rigid bureaucracy on the part of the Pentagon, end quote. Donald Trump also weighed in with this.
The corrupt system can also force brave National Guardsmen from California to return the bonuses they were promised. Something that would never happen under a Trump administration. This can only happen with these incompetent people we have running. And people with no common sense. They're incompetent, but they have no common sense.
All right. I'll quickly start with the politics, and then I want to go to Melissa on the human element in all of this. This fits in very neatly in a narrative that Donald Trump started 18 months ago.
Incompetency on the part of the government, corruption on the part of the government.
Corruption, that word.
This is an administration that, I mean, what do we pick a subject that we've talked about today? In every instance, the Obama administration is incompetent, it is corrupt, and the extension of Hillary Clinton just adds to the degree, the order of magnitude of the corruption. Yeah. And she isn't talking about a single issue.
The human side of this
is heartbreaking. I mean, I was talking to Army Master Sergeant Susan Haley yesterday on my show, who was in tears. She had spent years and years away from her family in Kosovo. She had a husband who was in Afghanistan. She had a son who went to Iraq and lost part of his leg. It is a family who has made the greatest sacrifices for our country. She was given a bonus like this to go back. Years later, when she came back after she had spent all that time away from her family, they said, guess what? You were overpaid and we want that money back. She says they send a quarter of their income right now, a quarter of their income
it was
to the government.
Contract that they entered, okay, and put their lives on the line for. In addition to that personal story, there are hundreds and thousands of more stories of people taking out second mortgages to be able to even pay back this bonus that they were promised and that they took many, many years ago.
So why can't the government take care of this?
They can.
They have so much of our money. If we volunteered to
Congress
relieve
has known about this for
the
2 years.
situation
Why didn't
for
Nancy
these soldiers?
Pelosi or Barbara Boxer or Dianne Feinstein contact Hillary Clinton and let her know this was
President
going on?
Obama could fix it if he wanted wanted
That's
to.
exactly what Judge
with that
Napolitano
pen
said
he likes to
yesterday.
use.
He could issue an executive order, and
nobody
we
would have a
have
problem
with
with
this.
Chief.
I call it the execu-pen. But my point is,
He doesn't give a damn,
As
okay?
citizens,
He doesn't care.
These are our dollars. These are our tax dollars. So my question is,
It's
if
our
enough-
word. It's our word,
It's
more
also our
importantly.
word.
It's our contract with the men and women
That's
who
right.
serve this nation in uniform. End of story. Tell these damn fools to back off, the general staff that did this. There's a reason that we've been in a fight against radical Islam for 15 years. It's because of generals who think like this. And we need to tell them to
I have a hard time,
go
Lou.
away.
Every
How
time
could
I
they
read
possibly
an
do
update on
that?
this story, how it's even defensible.
It
How is
isn't.
this defensible for anybody? How does this still exist?
I know, but that was the incentive. This was at the height of the war in 2006, 2007. They didn't have enough combat troops.
We needed people.
And they were going to people who were both patriotic and in need, and they were preying upon them with these incentives. So they made some sort of a clerical mistake. Where did that happen? Where was the breakdown in that chain?
And why did they wait so long? Because then it's not the mistake, it's the cover-up. I know that's not the original quote because it's really crime. But when you make a mistake like this, so grave for these people, it is like a crime.
No, and it's devastating. I mean, this woman yesterday, just to go back to her story, like you said, is like so many out there. I mean, her whole family has made such sacrifices. She said the years we spent away from each other, the things that we did, and she goes, and I wanted to, I wanted to serve my country. That's my priority. But when I came back, it wasn't, thank you for all the time that you spent away. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for everything you've done. No, it was give us our money back, and we're attacking your credit, and we're attacking your wages.
Can you imagine, remember the GI Bill? And
Sure.
Can you imagine if the government started clawing back on what it's done per the military for decades? What a mess.
a different time, a different country in point of fact, and certainly different leaders. This president could have taken care of this in less time than we've spent just talking about it here today.
That's true.
The only way it would have
That's
taken longer is if he couldn't find the pen to sign with. We'll move on. New leaked emails from WikiLeaks appearing to show one of Hillary Clinton's top advisors concerned about what she said behind closed doors to Goldman Sachs in big money speeches. We'll discuss that. Stay close.
Leaked emails from Hillary Clinton's longtime advisors appearing to show concern over the impact of Clinton's paid speeches to Goldman Sachs. In particular, how Clinton apparently avoided placing blame for the 2008 recession on Wall Street. In a January 2016 email to Clinton insiders, Mandy Grunwald allegedly admits, quote, "It's pretty bad. She is critical to some extent of what led to the crash, but the more memorable stuff is totally accommodationist." She also says Clinton made tepid remarks about Obamacare and some naive-sounding comments about Russian President Vladimir Putin. All right, so I don't know. First of all, I have to ask, does this go anywhere before we even discuss this? Is it worth discussing?
I think so, from the standpoint that she is saying all sorts of nonsense behind closeted Wall Street doors and wants that kept secret. And if it weren't for WikiLeaks, we wouldn't know the kind of nonsense she was spewing.
But it seems to be baked in as far as we don't see a dramatic change in polling or a
But I
change.
do think we need to know accommodationist. So what did she promise them? That's going to come back to haunt us potentially.
We know.
So I'd
No,
like
we
to
know.
know exactly what it was, and that's why I think it's important. So if we can find this out, and now that we are finding it out,
She said
that part about it is important.
I mean, she sat there and she said,
Outside
listen,
of politics.
there are things that people, say because it's political and you have to, but I understand what really went on here, and she basically showed that same thing we see all the time. She says one thing when she's out there doing a speech to some people, we hate Wall Street, make them pay their fair share, they're robbers, they need to go to jail, I'll be tough on Wall Street. Then she gets paid $675,000 in 2013 for her speech at Goldman Sachs. That's just one note. And she says to them, listen, don't worry.
Yeah,
I
it's
know.
gonna be okay. I'm
No,
gonna
but
do
how
what I
can
need
you
to do for you.
possibly say that? Because there's a big difference between having a public stance and a private stance, and perhaps your private one is a little bit softer and more nuanced. But what she's saying is in diametric opposition to herself. So how can she stand before a group of investment bankers and talk about how Dodd-Frank is problematic and how essentially Wall Street has to regulate itself, but then she's out there on the stump in New Hampshire with Elizabeth Warren, talking about this ultra-left progressivism that it flies in the face.
You can't
of what
figure
she
it
said to
out.
Goldman Sachs.
As I read her speeches and I listened to Lloyd Blankfein, I thought, looking at it on paper, It's like the dialogue you would have expected between Bonnie and Clyde after a big heist. It is really repulsive to even think of. She's saying to Wall Street, you know, we can't regulate unless you regulate yourselves. And if that isn't what she's offering, I don't know how else
the truth,
to look at it.
But what is the truth? I mean, is it the private or the public? And I would love to be in the car ride to the stage yesterday in New Hampshire with Senator Elizabeth Warren to know exactly, did she hold her feet to the fire? Look, I'm going to get out there on the dais and support you, but can you tell me what the truth is? Because obviously this is something that Warren really cares about.
She would have been very flattered by your question.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think. I mean,
you don't think they got that
deep?
deep?
I don't care what her answer
well,
is.
They were.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm telling you the truth. I was lying to them. She goes,
or
to them,
is it the other way around?
You the truth. I was lying to them. What does she believe, if anything? Maybe she doesn't believe anything.
I mean, but look at all of these things. But when you take them in totality, why doesn't it make more of a difference? The Terry McAuliffe thing, you know, that almost $500,000 payment he made to the FBI deputy director's wife in her losing state Senate campaign. Donald Duck, you know, apparently she was one who solicited Donald Duck to go. And now we're talking about the hypocrisy, the blatant hypocrisy in these Goldman Sachs speeches. So why doesn't it matter?
Because no one is selling it. It does matter. It does matter.
It's
but
corruption
who's making the sale?
on any level.
This seems to all fall back to that, in the words of Lou Dobbs. All right, remember when Donald Trump called Hillary Clinton a nasty woman at that last debate? Well, Elizabeth Warren sure does. Now she's calling on nasty women to vote on November 8th, whether it's a good rallying cry for Dems or just pandering to female voters.
Oh, look at this. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren joining Hillary Clinton on the campaign trail of tears and revving up a crowd in New Hampshire by ripping into Donald Trump and turning his nasty woman comment from the last debate into a feminist rallying cry. Watch this.
Women have had it with guys like you, and nasty women have really had it with guys like you. Nasty women are tough. Nasty women are smart, and nasty women vote. And on November 8th, we nasty women are going to march our nasty feet to cast our nasty votes to get you out of our lives forever.
Whoa, Liz, slow your roll. She's really embracing that nasty title, isn't she?
Why is it that I only think of Janet Jackson during that speech?
She was thinking about nasty boys.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is the place that we've gone to. This is where we are in this campaign. I wish he hadn't said it. You know, I mean, it adds more fuel to her fire. It's not
exactly like a Beyonce song. I mean, you don't really want to join hands.
After hearing that anger, that hate, I'm a little hurt, a little intimidated, a little fearful. Just thinking, you know, I mean, who does she think nasty women represent a threat to? It's not to men, it's to other women. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing these people are tripping, if I may use the 60s phrase.
Well, one thing's very clear by her words on that stage is that she truly believes that she's speaking on behalf of all women.
That's true.
Good Lord.
Yeah. You really get that sense that she thinks she's speaking on behalf of all of us. And then Hillary Clinton, while she didn't actually use the phrase nasty woman up on that stage, she did seem to enjoy it a bit, as you saw. And she said she gets under his skin like nobody, his thin skin like nobody else. Clearly, that's all they're trying to do here. And will it work? Hillary Clinton said it's probably bait for him to get back on Twitter and
and Elizabeth Warren's followers, they love that about her. They love that she's going after him with full force. But, you know, I think it's absolutely right. Like, do you really want to brand yourself a nasty woman? A way to be positive.
Well, I'm a little confused about just how Elizabeth Warren got to be the one who could decide the meaning that Donald Trump attached to that word during the debate. I mean, he was talking about, I mean, they both were talking about all sorts of topics during that debate. And it was kind of the culmination. I mean, he calls her Crooked Hillary.
Yeah.
I mean, he was putting that, as I understood it, inside that that title, which you've heard him say he would throw her in jail if he could, if he were president. So I'm wondering, now Senator Warren has attached this sort of, well, it's the every girl and we're all nasty. In the context of what he was talking about, that would not actually be all women.
I listen to that and I think about, I care about the economy. I care about that median income has fallen so dramatically under President Obama when he's promised to help people get ahead. The gap between rich and poor has grown so dramatically because of the Federal Reserve's policy that's only jacked the stock market. I mean, economic growth in this country is so tepid. Jobs are not being created. Schools are terrible. We are not safe as a country. We need to restore law and order. Like, I look at this, talking about, what Donald Trump thinks of Hillary Clinton and the names that we're calling each other. We have real
Melissa. You sounded like Kellyanne Conway just there, his campaign manager, and I wonder also, is she scratching her head, or if this is part of the strategy?
Well, I just want to think of all those women who needed a rallying cry from Elizabeth Warren to get out to vote. I mean, it was preposterous.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an effective rallying cry.
I don't.
But as you point out, government is the impediment, not the solution. All right, get out the peanuts and Cracker Jack. Game 1 of the World Series, history in the making, as neither team has won the Fall Classic in more than a half century. You can see it only on Big Fox, and in just a moment, we got some cool facts from the Wayback Machine. Hop in.
Game 1 of the Fall Classic is tonight. The Cubs and Indians go head-to-head. A lovely live picture that you are seeing from the ballpark in Cleveland. The last time the Cubs won the World Series was in 1908. Like this year, there was a presidential election going on. Republican William Howard Taft defeated Democrat William Jennings Bryan. And in 1908, a ticket to a Cubs game went for about a quarter. Tickets for Game 1 were going for about $6,000 this week.
Whoa.
When the Indians last won in 1948, also a presidential election year, Democrat Harry Truman defeated Republican Thomas Dewey. Very few Americans had TV sets back in 1948. And a ticket to the old Cleveland Stadium, a whopping $6. All right, there is no Billy Goat curse. I am a lifelong Cubs fan. Grew up with a father, a brother. Everybody's Cubs fans. There's no such thing. Didn't you see the Bill Murray T-shirt with the extra? It doesn't exist, all right? But that dates back to the last time they were in the World Series, 1945. A tavern owner brought a goat to the stadium. It stayed, and ever since there's been a curse.
Well, I'm fascinated because you have the team with the biggest drought, and then you have the team with the second biggest drought in the Indians, and now they're going to go head-to-head. So I'm
Cubs fans are loyal. They've been waiting for this moment for a very long time, Lou Dobbs.
Well, and good on them. And I love the fact, 1908, we're talking about the last time we had a major national populist figure running for the presidency in William Jennings Bryan. Yeah. And in the universe, things right themselves. We seek balance. And so it looks like maybe a win, huh?
So Bryan was not victorious in 1908.
That's why
so perhaps his counterpart will be in 2016. 108 years later, Lou Dobbs.
I love how you decode what Lou says.
Sometimes things are worth waiting for.
These are two storied teams. Melissa, will you be watching Game 1?
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking about the song they were playing in the beginning, Put Me in Coach. I like sitting up front. No?
I just think there are so many.
You and I know about as much about baseball.
Thank you, Katie. That's about all I have.
Wrigley Field wasn't even built in 1908, the last time the Cubs won the World Series.
I have to think Harry Carey is somewhere up there looking down and smiling.
Yeah, or
wearing his glasses.
The great
holy cow
of Harry Carey.
Let's go back to 1908 and think of all that wasn't.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
Or 1908.
Fox News alert, 2 weeks to go. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump stumping in the battleground state of Florida today as part of their final push to Election Day. All this as a new national poll showing a dead heat. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, Harris Faulkner, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy. Also from FBN, co-host of After the Bell, Melissa Francis. And today's #OneLuckyGuy. We have a Fox Business trifecta today. The host of Lou Dobbs tonight. Lou Dobbs himself is here, and he is outnumbered.
Actually, you're
Harris
not.
is outnumbered.
I'm outnumbered. You guys are all from Fox Business. But you know what?
You just took the pressure off.
I'm giving it right back to you, my friend.
No.
That outnumberedness.
I love it.
Welcome. I haven't seen you in a while.
How are you feeling this final stretch?
I love it. You're talking about 2 weeks to go in this thing. It seems like we've been sort of dreading the pace of this thing for so long.
Yeah.
And now suddenly I'm dreading the prospect that it might be over.
You are?
Somewhat.
Depression technique, and that's happening to me all the time. It's called voter suppression. Because people will say, oh, gee, Trump's out. Folks, we're winning. We're winning. We're winning.
He really keeps hammering on this point, Lou, that the polls are wrong and that he's actually winning.
And it's not an accident, as you know, that he is doing that, because this resonates with his base. It resonates with independents, because everyone knows these polls aren't making a lot of sense. You've got some outliers at 12-point differentials and others with him in the lead. National tracking polls, specifically IBD and the LA Times USC polls.
But his critics are quick to point out that when this race started, and especially in the primary season, he was quick to point out those polls when they showed that he was winning.
You know, quick is an interesting word to use, because remember, it took a long time for him to plow through the national liberal media, attacking him as not being serious, not being able to get even to the primaries. And the next thing you know, it was February 1st, and he had a little setback in Iowa. And the next thing you know, he starts, the Trump train, as they call it, starts rolling. So there's been, I know what you mean by quick, but this thing was a process that he had to overcome national media bias every step of the way, and has done so.
It is tough to determine. And for the average voter to look at these polls and determine, well, which ones do you pay attention to and which ones are telling us what's going on?
So I'm wondering if they're paying that much attention anymore. I mean, remember when we were on the ground at the conventions and you would talk with people, particularly obviously the RNC in Cleveland about this, people were really resisting the notion of taking them. Like, they didn't really want to take part. They're going to keep it close to the vest. So I've often wondered all along how accurate they've been, knowing that people either are not going to be forthright because they don't want to start that conversation with anybody, or they're just going to avoid the process altogether.
What's interesting here with the IBD poll specifically is, you know, we talk a lot about whether these polls are skewed based on how many landlines are used, what is the methodology, and with IBD they actually use more cell phones than landlines, 65 to 35%. And you also have to remember, in all of these polls, Trump is still up with independents. And you also have to note that independents make up more of the electorate than Democrats or Republicans. 34% independents, 33% Democrats, 29% Republicans.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So you look at all the polls all together, and he's lagging, obviously. But at the same time, he comes out and he says these are rigged. Everybody sort of laughs at him. But you go back to when he said, and we're going to get to the story later in the show, so I don't want to undercut it, but this idea that when he said the violence was being incited at his rallies by Hillary Clinton's team, and people lashed out at him and said, you know, what a thing to say, you know, to point the finger like that. You have no evidence. Lo and behold, here we come down the line, and we're seeing evidence. So he says these things that people mark as crazy, and then later the evidence trickles out. I don't know.
Can I say, people aren't doing that. The national liberal media is doing that. And it's a really important distinction. I'm ready.
All right. Yeah. Well, we're ready for you. Let's get started. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton looking to build support in Florida again today, a day after early in-person voting began in the Sunshine State. This is an independent daily tracking survey billed as the nation's most accurate, shows the candidates locked in a virtual tie, even as other polls show Hillary leading the presidential race. The Investor's Business Daily poll shows Trump and Clinton neck and neck, with Hillary leading 42 to 41% in a four-way race. But a new CNN poll finds the Democratic nominee leading by 5 points nationally, 49 to 44%. All this as Donald Trump continues to denounce most of the polls as phony, while declaring that he's actually winning.
The system is corrupt, folks, and I've been saying it, it's rigged. I've been saying it for a long time. The system is rigged. WikiLeaks also shows how John Podesta rigged the polls, oversampling Democrats, a voter